Good evening, fight fans, and welcome to another edition of CES Boxing Classics. I am your host, Michael Parante, CES Boxing publicist and matchmaker. For tonight's edition, we bring you all the way back to October 14th, 2006, the crosstown rivalry between Peter Manfredo Jr. and Joey the KO Kid Spina. This one aired live from the Dunkin' Donuts Center on ESPN2, a special Saturday night edition of Fights, and it was appropriately titled Put Up or Shut Up. This was a rivalry that was really a long time in the making in Providence. And to really help set the scene, we're going to go all the way back to 2005. Peter Manfredo rose to stardom that year for his role on the Contender reality television series. Now, the Contender was the brainchild of Sugar Ray Leonard. Tony Danza was also involved. Sylvester Stallone from Rocky fame was also involved in this reality series where boxers lived together, fought against one another, and in the end, on a live finale special, somebody fought for a grand prize in the championship match. Peter Manfredo was one of the few selected to compete on that first series, and actually lost his first fight to Alfonso Gomez, and then returned to the house when someone had to leave due to injury, and then advanced all the way to the finals to fight Sergio Mora. Now, boxing people really took to Manfredo at this time. He was billed as the working class hero. He was someone who had more than 300 amateur fights. His father had dragged him to the gym when he was 6 years old to introduce him to boxing, and he instantly fell in love with it. And Peter's always been blunt from day one about why he fights. It wasn't about titles or stardom or fame. He fought to provide for his family. And Peter made that clear, and he really resonated with the working class boxing fan. So from that appearance, that lost to Sergio Mora in the finals, and then the subsequent rematch a year later, Manfredo really became a national name in professional boxing, not just in Providence. Now, around that same time, Joey Spina was making his mark as one of the hardest hitters in New England and a rising star in the light heavyweight division. Spina, at the time going into this bout, was 19-0, 14 of his wins by knockout. He had earned the nickname the KO Kid. Now, these two grew up in Providence, never really meshed outside of the ring. They sparred each other a couple of times, but Manfredo really was a different breed than Spina. Now, Manfredo, again, was the working class fighter. He had a family, he had a home. He had made paydays up until that point in the sport from having fought on the Contender and then having fought outside the Contender. Joey Spina was someone who came up. He was born in the Silver Lake section of Providence as opposed to Manfredo, who was born and raised in the Federal Hills section of Providence. Spina only had a handful of amateur fights, maybe between 20 and 30. He fought because he knew it could be a way for him to make some money. Got into a lot of trouble when he was younger. He fought in schoolyards, he fought in the streets, and then decided to parlay that ability into, at that time, a real blossoming boxing career. Now, going into this bout, there was some bad blood between the two, and that's how the whole thing really came about. Now, sources will tell you it started from different ways. Now, Peter Manfredo claims that in 2005, when Joey Spina fought in Providence, he came out to a rap song that actually featured lyrics disparaging Manfredo. Now, Manfredo took offense to that. Both he and his father were not big fans of Spina. That kind of really got things started. And then around that same time, Joey Spina fought on ESPN against Jesse Brinkley, who was also an alumni from the Contender. Manfredo did not get off to a good start in that fight. In the 11th round, landed a body blow that floored Brinkley and earning the win for Spina by knockout. And after that fight, Spina declared himself the Contender killer, which again was a shot at Manfredo. So you had all this madness brewing into what was going to be this major event. And the Contender was popular at that time. It was coming off its first season. It was set to be the next big thing in reality series and in sports entertainment. So the Contender would go around the country, kind of like Premier Boxing does today. They put on shows under the Contender banner, and other Contender fighters would fight on the cards. Now, in addition to Spina and Manfredo, you also had Alan Green fighting Jerson Ravello, and a young Philly fighter by the name of Hammer and Hank Lundy, who was just 2-0 at the time, starring on the undercard of this event in 2006. So the Contender would come into different towns, work with local promoters, and put on these grand events on ESPN, and the whole thing just kind of funneled together as part of the Contender series. Now, this one was big because Spina had beaten a Contender alum, and now is fighting a Contender star in Peter Manfredo. And you had what was really a throwback fight. Think back to the early days in boxing. Take a look at some of the fighters from the 30s and 40s, and even more recently, the 60s and 70s. Look at the fight history in Philadelphia and how those neighborhoods would fight against each other. Promoters like Russell Peltz, who made a killing putting Philly fighters versus Philly fighters. People in this sport and the fans love a great crosstown rival. It still goes on today, and even since this fight, we've had some great all New England bouts. I can think of Peter Manfredo versus Rich Gingras. Rich Gingras taking on Vladimir Bielsi, all fights that we've covered on this platform. But this fight in 2006 was probably the biggest in a long, long time, because you had two fighters from Providence, almost from the same neighborhood, two guys that did not like each other, and two guys who were really starting to blossom into stardom. Now, there were some other elements coming into this as well. Peter Manfredo coming off a big win over Scott the Sandman Pemberton in front of 10,000 fans in the Dunkin' Donuts Center. It was almost like a re-emergence of Peter in the super middleweight division. If you go back to the beginning of his career, Peter started off as a middleweight. It even dropped down to 154 for some fights in Rhode Island, and then went back up to middleweight for the Contender Series. And then after that, the first fight against Pemberton was really his introduction to super middleweight. So a lot of people at the time thought Peter might be too small to contend with Spina, who was really a light heavyweight, 175-pounder, coming down to super middleweight. And of course, Spina was known for his power. But these two also understood their roles and their place, and they also understood their abilities and their talent. Spina made it clear, listen, I'm not as good a boxer as Peter Manfredo, but I don't think he can handle my power. Days before the fight, Spina predicted a knockout. Peter Manfredo said he was going to embarrass Spina in front of his hometown fans and always maintained that he was the better boxer from a technical standpoint. So you had these two contrasting styles going against each other. You had Manfredo, who at the time was ranked number 14 in the WBC, and you had Joey KO Kid Spina looking for a way out of his background and his lifestyle to sort of get the kind of money that Manfredo had been making at the time in the sport. And it's not only a fight about two Providence fighters going against each other and two guys who didn't like each other. It's two fighters with completely different backgrounds. Again, we mentioned Manfredo with the 300-plus amateur fights, all the accolades before he turned pro. And you had Joey Spina, who was considered kind of a backyard brawler, only 20 amateur fights, jumped into the pro ranks, and really relied on his power in the early part of his career. Even Spina himself admits for the first 9 or 10 fights of his career, he didn't really train that much. He didn't take it as seriously. When you realize he had an ability, and he started to really put everything into boxing. So Spina took some, you would say, I don't want to say offense, but Spina had a certain feeling about Manfredo. He kind of felt that Manfredo kind of had things given to him from the Contender Series, that he had this silver spoon, so to speak, and that he really didn't earn it. And Manfredo wanted to say to Spina, listen, I went through the wars you went through, and I earned my spot here. So you had two different fighters, different backgrounds, different neighborhoods, different styles coming up, different circumstances at this time in their career. And this was the kind of fight that was going to determine which fighter can go up and which fighter might head down. Everything was on the line that night. It was the kind of fight that really divided households. You had a lot of boxers in New England who were close to both fighters, who had sparred with both fighters, who trained with both fighters, almost forced to pick sides. Who were you backing? Was it Manfredo, or were you backing Joey Spina? This was a true Rhode Island border war put on a national level for the whole world to see, and it really made for an exciting fight. The fireworks were on display that night at the Dunkin' Donuts Center. So we're going to take you back to 2006, the Contender, Put Up or Shut Up, Peter Manfredo versus Joey KO Kid Spina. Enjoy.
Shake hands. Good luck.
Long-time New England ref Charlie Dwyer. It is scheduled for 12, the ring experience. And the numbers will show an edge for Manfredo, but beyond that is the experience of fighting in this type of a setting, under this kind of pressure. Manfredo has been doing it for 2 years now, and this is by far the biggest stage for that man, Joey Spina. Round one.
Manfredo has not been in the ring for 8 months. Spina hopes that gives him an edge. Spina was last in the ring only 3 months ago.
Spina comes back with a left hand there after Manfredo tried the combination. You can see that knockout ratio, 70% for Spina. Manfredo, 39%. Goes to the body twice with the left hand, does Manfredo.
If there is an advantage in activity or a disadvantage in inactivity with Manfredo not being in the ring for 8 months and Spina only being in the ring 3 months ago, it's going to show itself early on because as rounds go by, if there is any rust with Manfredo, the rounds will get rid of them. Early on is the best opportunity for Spina.
Spina digging to the body, something called for in the fight plan.
see right away, Spina, physically the bigger man. Light heavyweight, his first 12 fights. Last 8 fights has fought at super middleweight. Manfredo, his entire career between middleweight and junior middleweight. Only moved up to super middleweight in his last fight.
Spina's walk-around weight when he's not training, when he's not cutting weight to make a fight, is 195 pounds.
No better way when you're the bigger man to show that advantage than to go to the smaller man's body. And that's exactly what Spina's trying to do. Spina likes going to the body. The problem is every once in a while he does that. Goes to the body from too far away, as we talked about in the fight plan. And when he does that, leaves himself wide open for counters from the quicker Manfredo.
Quicker and more skillful, Peter Manfredo.
Manfredo better technically. Absolutely correct, Joe.
He has honed those skills at the Wild Card Gym with Freddie Roach, one of the best trainers in the entire world out in LA. And it was really a great decision that Manfredo made, a very difficult decision, when his father had been training him his whole life, and he said, I need to take this to the next level. I love my dad, but we argue too much. I need to be with Freddie Roach. And he has grown and developed since that decision tremendously.
As we've already stated, Spina bigger physically. The problem is he's also bigger with his punches, like that. Bigger, fatter, and wider.
That was wide, and it was nowhere near Peter Manfredo.
And the straighter punches of Manfredo can get there first, but he just got caught a good left hook.
Didn't backing up. Spina on the attack.
The end of the last round, we talked about the wide punching of Spina, but where it can be effective is when you pull back from those wide punches. Manfredo, late in the round, pulled back and pulled into the path of those long shots of Spina. Here's another look. As Manfredo pulls back, he pulls directly back into the long looping shots and the strong shots of Spina.
High energy atmosphere here in Providence. Two fighters, you don't hear this often, announced from the different areas of the city you're fighting in. Silver Lake for Joey Spina, the famed Federal Hill for Peter Manfredo, and that was an intense first round.
You know, Manfredo, I believe, has more options here. He's a better technically smaller man, faster man, but he can go outside, he can box, he can use the ring a little bit, keep Spina, who needs to be set on those wide legs. Look at how wide the legs of Spina are. He needs to be set. Manfredo can move around, make circles, keep him from getting set, keep him from being effective. Also, Manfredo can go inside, believe it or not, in the eye of the storm and punch inside the wide shots of Spina. Spina can only do one thing: come forward and try to use his strength and catch him with one of those power shots.
Three-punch combination from Manfredo. Left hook, straight right, left to the body.
But all the options are in the favor of Manfredo. One thing he can't afford to do, Joe, and that's to pull out from too close, because then he will allow the wider, less technical punches of Spina to be effective. You pull back from a wide punch from too close, you will eat leather on your way out. It is very important for Manfredo to negotiate distance, either be all the way inside or all the way outside.
Lead right hand from Peter Manfredo Jr.
Again, straight will beat round, and right now, Manfredo's straight right hand beating the wide left hook of Spina. Joe, you said that you thought it should be a knockdown. Well, pictures do not lie. The right hand landed and the right knee landed on the canvas by Spina. That should have been a knockdown. Spina was saved from a 10-8 round.
Peter Manfredo is wasting no time. Spina's on weak legs. Spaghetti strings holding him up. And this is early in the third round.
And again, the options of Manfredo showing he can go inside, he can go outside, he can go inside with the stronger man because his punches are straight.
This was the round in this ring, in this building when he toppled Pemberton. Can he come up with threes a charm in round 3 again?
Right now,
Big right hand.
Spina falling apart physically and maybe mentally as he's shaking that left hand. And now showing he's hurt in other areas, not just in the area of the left hand.
They threw in the towel. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad says, I've seen enough. And that was personal right there. Manfredo's still talking to him. This is a personal war. Forget promotion, forget hype. This was bad, bad blood here tonight.
Well, this is where the commission needs to have security in the ring so things do not get out of hand with, as you just said, bad feelings and high emotions.
You can still see the rage in Manfredo's face. He had talked about the fact that for the past year, Spina had done nothing but disrespect him in his hometown, and he was going to take it out on him tonight.
Proof once again that bigger is not always better in boxing. It's about technique, it's about mental control, it's about confidence, it's about executing. And all those things were done by the smaller Manfredo tonight. Punching inside the wide shots of Spina. We talked about it earlier. Spina, when he throws wide shots and strong shots, he leaves himself open. And Manfredo took advantage of those openings all night long with straight right hands.
Let's look back at the third round. The right hand started to rein in the second round, and right off the bat in the third round, he came after him, Teddy.
Well, we talked about it early on that the right hand of Manfredo would play a big part of the fight tonight for him, and it did. And the reason, the wide left hook of Spina would leave an opening. And Manfredo took advantage of that opening and got inside with his faster, shorter shots. And again, you can see Manfredo comfortable inside and outside. Comfortable inside with the straight shots that he got inside those wide hands of Spina. And he was also comfortable on the outside using those quick legs.
And then watch from the corner of Joey Spina. The towel comes in as referee Charlie Dwyer is counting him out. And this is where Peter Manfredo and the emotion and all the rage and the bad blood, it just got the best of him and his father as they were still in Spina's face. Not great sportsmanship, but folks, tonight, this had little to do with being a sport. This was personal.
And that man throwing the towel in was a man that understands how to take care of a fighter. Former light heavyweight champion Eddie Mustafa Muhammad doing the right thing, reading his fighter physically and even mentally with the body language of a spent and beaten Joey Spina.
For the official particulars, let's send it up to the ring to Jim Connor.
Ladies and gentlemen, in 1 minute and 1 second of the third round, referee Charlie Dwyer stops the fight. The winner by TKO, the pride of Providence, Peter Manfredo Jr.
Peter Manfredo Jr. He has owned this building this year. 2 times he has fought in the spotlight with big crowds here. 2 times he has come away with third round knockout wins.
Join me in another round of applause for your other son, Joey KO Kid Spina. Let him hear it.
And 3 with 12 knockouts. The ring rust, an 8-month layoff? I think not. Manfredo was razor sharp. Right hand after right hand, and Spina could not deal with it. He turned it on in the third round. He never let up. There's the big right that got things started as Manfredo was on his way to the most emotionally filled win of his career. When we come back, we will hear from Peter Manfredo Jr. on the heels of his knockout win. Stay with us.
Guys, just a reminder.
The Dunkin' Donuts Center in downtown Providence still buzzing here on this put-up or shut-up contender special. Joe Tessitore and Teddy Atlas now joined ringside by the pride of Providence, Peter Manfredo Jr., coming off of the third-round knockout of Joey Spina. How did that one feel? A lot of emotions running through you tonight.
It just felt great. But, I was focused in the game plan. I knew I was a step above him, and obviously it showed tonight. He really had nothing for me. But then again, he got his 15 minutes of fame on TV like he wanted. He made his payday, but I'm looking for bigger and better things.
Peter, you've always been an honest fighter. Are you that good, or was his flaws that bad tonight?
I don't know. I'll let you be the judge of that. You're the master at that. I'm just going there and I get a paycheck.
You did what you had to do, and you did what was available to do. And you proved once again it's not about the size of the man. It's about the skills and the technique, and of course the mind of a man.
Right, and the heart of the man. I got the heart of a lion, an Italian warrior. I wear the IW on my trunks, and that's why I'll fight anybody. I'm a throwback to the old school. They call me at Freddie's gym Lamada. I'll take 3 to give 1.
And straight right hands beat wide left hooks.
Straight right hands. All straight punches beat wide punches.
Let's talk about those straight right hands as we have you look at some of your highlights of your fine work tonight. The plan was executed perfectly.
Yeah, very perfect. That's what we worked on in the gym. We knew this kid was wide. A lot of feints. We worked with Freddie, a lot of jabs, setting everything off the jab. The right hand's there. His left hand's down. His right hand's always down for hooks. He's just a wide puncher, and he tries to knock you out, but he got outschooled.
What happened to the criticism of you moving up in weight that, he won't be able to punch at 168 pounds? Well, you punch in this building pretty good this year, 2 third-round knockouts.
Hey, forget it. In Providence, I go home, I have my grandmother's veal pizza. And fight night, I have the raviolis. Forget it. I'm full of vinegar, olive oil, everything. I'll knock anybody out.
Popeye with his spinach, Teddy.
Popeye with his spinach.
Peter, I was saying going into this fight that even though he was the bigger man, you were technically the better man. You had more choices, more options how to go about it. You could box on the outside, or you could actually go in the den of the lion and go inside those wide shots. At what point did you decide to go inside and not box on the outside?
When he started getting a little confidence after the first round, he survived the round. I don't know, maybe I won the round by a little bit. I just wanted to punish this kid. For all that stuff he talked, I wanted to punish him right off the bat. I just wanted the round to get warmed up and to get going. I wish I punished him for a couple more rounds, to be honest with you.
There's no doubt you keep improving fight after fight. You've been with Freddie Roach, and you keep improving, you're dedicating yourself. There have been rumors. We've heard about a Roy Jones pay-per-view. Joe Calzaghe, world champion, won tonight. What is next for Peter Manfredo Jr.?
Whatever the contender, I'm a contender fighter. I went back with them. I'm very happy to be with them. Wherever they put me, I'm ready. Providence is here. They got my back. I'll fight anybody. Throw them in the ring, I'll fight them.
But will anybody want to come here and fight you? Peter Manfredo Jr. in his hometown gets the big win against Joey Spina. Third-round knockout, and they will be celebrating in the Federal Hills section tonight.
There it is. The Rhode Island rivalry ends in 3 rounds with Peter Manfredo Jr. knocking out Joey Spina, much to the surprise of many who thought that it was Joey Spina's power that would be too much for Peter Manfredo to handle. Now, if you watch the fight early on, that opening round, Spina's power did seem to get the better of Manfredo, and perhaps maybe it took a little bit for Manfredo to kind of absorb what Spina was going to throw at him and really get a gauge for the power. Because you hear a lot of boxers talk about facing power punches, and what they'll tell you is, you need to get hit a couple times to really see what they're working with. And I think once Manfredo figured it out, it was really his fight from there. And of course, Joey Spina did suffer a broken hand in the second round. Now, some fighters can bounce back from that. They mentally sharpen up, they focus, they sort of maybe refocus their effort in a different way and find a way to persevere. But for Spina, it really just unraveled for him at that point. He had absorbed the injury in camp leading up to that fight, wasn't going to back down and pull out of the fight, so he went into it knowing that he wasn't 100%. I think even before that, mentally, he really wasn't quite there. And then in the middle of the fight, to have it break again, just when it seemed like you were actually doing well, it can really unnerve a fighter. And I think that was pretty clear that Spina was not the same after that. You saw the beginning of that third round, Manfredo lands a bomb and just finished the fight within seconds. Spina physically, mentally drained at that point, and it was a no contest. And you saw the bad blood spill over. If you see from the corner of the ring, Peter Manfredo's father, Peter Manfredo Sr., running into the ring and almost jumping on top of Spina's trainer, Mustafa Muhammad, and just the bad blood was still there even after the knockout. You could see the look on Peter's face after the knockout win. It's like he wanted more of Joey after that fight. So, and this rivalry never really died down. The funny thing is, these two were actually supposed to fight again in 2013. Yours truly had helped put the fight together. Manfredo Spina 2 at the Twin River Event Center. Unfortunately, Joey Spina sustained an injury in camp leading up to that fight about 2 weeks out, and that one was then eventually scrapped. And it was one of those things that if it wasn't going to happen then, it was never going to happen. And now in 2020, 14 years later from their first fight, clearly never going to happen now. After this fight, both fighters really went in different directions career-wise, which was kind of the theme going in. And we knew that the winner was going to move on to some bigger, better things. And the loser of that fight may be forced to restart. For Manfredo, this parlayed into a mega bout against Joe Calzaghe overseas on HBO. Manfredo came out on the short end of the stick there. But again, for a fighter who has always made it clear that he's fighting to provide for his family, this was the ultimate goal here, to get a fight against a fighter like Calzaghe, one of the all-time greats. Big payday for Peter Manfredo and an opportunity to continue to provide for his family, put some money aside, and just continue to do what he does. He also later on in his career would go on to fight Jeff Lacey on the undercard of the Floyd Mayweather-Ricky Hatton bout. I believe that was in 2012. And then it would also parlay his comeback into another title shot against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. in Texas. So Manfredo continued to fight. He would step up in competition. He'd land the big fights that he wanted to land, and then he would just keep coming back and keep coming at you. Manfredo eventually returned to Twin River to the more local circuit later in his career. You're talking about the 2015 era fights against Rich Gingras, and of course the fight against Vladimir Biasi that we talked about on this podcast before. So Manfredo still there, still at it. Returned to the ring late this last year in November against Melvin Russell Jr., his first fight in a while there, scored a first-round knockout win. That was actually his first fight since the Biasi fight in 2016. And then Manfredo returned later in 2019 in December at Foxwoods Resort Casino. That was just 2 weeks after his comeback bout, and scored another knockout win. So Manfredo still going strong, still wants to fight. Obviously, COVID-19 and all the regulations in boxing have really put the regional promoters on hold. Top Rank and other fight promotions are still running events with big TV dollars, but the smaller regional promotions don't have that luxury. So fighters like Manfredo and others are kind of shut out at the moment. Now, Joey Spina's career, never really the same after that Manfredo bout. Probably the next biggest fight he had was against Vladimir Biasi here in Rhode Island at Twin River Casino. And that was one of the last times we saw Spina. Biasi won that fight convincingly by decision. And again, it just never really materialized for Joey after that fight. He was always a great puncher. He was always the kind of fighter that if he was in that ring and he was there that night, you knew that there was a chance that he could put somebody to sleep. But could just never really maintain a consistency, both in and out of the ring. And I think after that Manfredo fight, things just took a turn for the worse for him in his career. But I still remember Spina as one of the great New England fighters, a hard hitter, a hard puncher, a showman, and a guy who, really, unfortunately for him, I think going into that Manfredo bout, really kind of had the heel role. He was perceived as the bad guy. Peter was the good guy, the working class fighter. But I felt that both fighters were really humble coming into that bout, and I feel like both fighters have been humbled over the course of their career since then. And we've had a lot of long conversations with Joey Spina about his career and things that he would do differently. Much like Peter working to provide for his family, Joey wanted to help his father, who was in an assisted living facility at the time, and help him get out and get back into his home. So, Joey had a good heart. His intentions were in the right place, but that night, it really just didn't work out for him. But for at least one night in New England, we had one of the best rivalries on paper materialize in the ring in front of the entire world on ESPN. And if you go back and you watch it again, the crowd noise, the introductions of the fighters, the ring walks, everything was so hyped and dramatized. It really made for an incredible show. And it's one of those things you really like to see at every event. This, at the end of the day, it's a sport, but it's also entertainment. And fighters are showmen just as much as an actor or a musician or a performer. And they go in the ring and they put on for the fans. And that night, both Joey Spina and Peter Manfredo put on for the city of Providence in one of the more memorable bouts. It kind of gives me that Hagler-Hearns vibe where you were expecting a long war. You only got 3 rounds, but you got 3 very entertaining rounds. One of those fights that, even though it didn't last a long time, it was great while it lasted. And that's what I'll always remember about Peter Manfredo versus Joey Spina. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me once again for CES Boxing Podcast. I am Michael Parente. We're going to see you next week with another edition. Take care.